J'ai un peu mal aux yeux en fait.
Est-ce qu'on peut diminuir a luz aqui ou apagar até? Mas ele está incomodando muito. Ou apagar ou diminuir. Tenta diminuir para ver se está ok. Não, mas ele quer usar o branco.
Yeah, a bit less, is it possible? Just turn it off, it's not possible? Because for the board?
Yes, basically they are filming.
Ah.
So
Okay.
maybe if we can find something in between.
Yeah. Well, this is better at least.
Yeah, you just try to not look like that.
Yeah, but I feel my eyes because they're a bit itching already, so
okay.
I have to be a bit careful.
Okay, let's start.
Okay, yes.
Hi. So it's a pleasure to welcome you for our first plenary talk. And I just have a short announcement. So we have plug stations at every seat. So you can charge your computer and keep it charged during the conference. So you just check on your right or on your left. There is a plug station. Okay? So it's a pleasure to announce Pierre Nolan. He's from ETH Zurich in Switzerland. And he will talk about frozen percolation in 2 dimensions.
Okay, well, can you hear me? Is it fine? Yes, okay. Right, first of all, I would like to thank all the organizers for this very kind invitation. It's always a great pleasure to come back to Brazil. I think it's my third Brazilian School of Probability already. And so the title of my talk is Frozen Percolation in 2 dimensions. But more generally, so this is the title I indicated a few months ago, but more generally, I put this subtitle to 2-dimensional statistical mechanics at and near the critical point, conformal invariance and related questions, in the sense that I aim at giving a general introduction about statistical mechanics with a special focus on models on lattices in 2 dimensions. And we'll explain how a fine understanding of what's called the phase transition in this case can lead to a very good understanding of models for which the phase transition so we'll talk about independent percolation, spontaneously arises. And well, along the way, I will discuss the conformal invariance property and several related models. So this is a joint work with Rob van den Berg, who's at CVI and VU in Amsterdam, and Demeter Kiss, who was at the University of Cambridge when we did this work. Now he's working for a hedge fund, but he was at Cambridge. Okay, so I will talk about Frozen percolation in the last third of my talk, but first I will give an introduction to a statistical mechanics model on lattices, and then explain how we can describe what happens at and near criticality and why it's important to understand processes which display a form of self-organized criticality, meaning that the phase transition of independent percolation will spontaneously arise. Okay, so first, a model for random media, which is called independent percolation. So this was introduced by Broadbent and Hammersley in 1957. So Hammersley was the famous British mathematician. Broadbent was actually an engineer. He was working for a gas mask factory. And he came to Hammersley to ask the question whether, if you consider a gas mask, whether the molecules can go through the mask or not. So is there a reasonable probability that the molecules can go through, or is there a very high probability that they cannot go through if you model the gas mask by some random arrangement of, I don't know, atoms or... Okay, so, well, the mathematical formulation of this question is the following. So percolation comes in 2 main flavors. So on the left, represented side percolation. This is obtained by playing with the vertices. On the right, this is bond percolation. This is obtained by playing with the edges. And well, let me first describe side percolation. So for side percolation, we fix some parameter p strictly between 0 and 1, so this will be the percolation parameter. And then we declare each side to be occupied with probability p and vacant with probability 1 minus p, independently of all the other sides. So we just toss a biased coin for each side, and so each side will be contain something with probability p and will be vacant with probability 1 minus p, independently of the other sides. So on my picture, I will always represent occupied by black and vacant by white. And so you get in this way a random coloring of the lattice. So here, this is the triangular lattice in two dimensions. So vertices are colored in white and black independently of each other. And bond percolation is defined in a similar way, but this time we play with the edges, which are called bonds in this case. Again, we fix some parameter p between 0 and 1, and each edge will be open with probability p and closed with probability 1 minus p, independently of the other edges, which means on this picture that, so open will mean that the edge is kept, and closed will mean that the edge is deleted on the picture. And so we get in this way a random subgraph of the square lattice Z2. And then, usually when we study percolation, one is interested in connectivity properties of the configuration so obtained. So on the right-hand side, we obtain a random subgraph of Z2, so we can ask connectivity properties of this random subgraph. So for example, if I take two vertices very far apart, say this vertex and this vertex, is there a reasonable probability that they are connected in the random subgraph? Or does this probability tend to 0 as the distance between these two vertices tends to infinity? Our related question is, what can you say about the connected components of this random subgraph? So here you can see that the vertices can be grouped into connected components. So this is one connected component. There are also some single-side connected components. So what can you say about the size, typical size of these connected components? And in particular, is there a reasonable probability that there is an infinite connected component, or or are all the connected components finite almost surely? And well, as I will explain in a minute, all these questions are intimately related. For side percolation, we can have similar questions. So here, vertices can be grouped into white and black connected components. So this is a black connected component, this is a white connected component. And we can also ask about, so what is the typical size of a large black connected component? Or if I take two vertices far apart, is there a reasonable probability that there is a path consisting only of black vertices going from first vertex to the second vertex, and so on. Okay, and percolation is arguably the simplest model which displays a phase transition as the parameter p varies. And concretely, it means the following. It means that there exists some critical value p sub c, it's called the percolation threshold, which lies strictly between 0 and 1, so that we see two completely different macroscopic behavior for the model according to whether p is smaller than pc or p is larger than pc. So for a value p of the parameter strictly between 0 and pc, one is in the subcritical regime. So for a value of the parameter p strictly smaller than pc. And in this case, it's known that there is almost surely no infinite cluster. And it's actually possible to be much more precise. One has actually a property of exponential decay for the size of the connected components. So this property of exponential decay means that if you consider a given vertex, for example, the origin, and you consider a box, or say a circle of radius n around the origin, so the probability is that there is such a connection, the probability at p that there is such a connection, decays exponentially fast in n, so it's smaller than or equal to c1 e to the minus c2n. So it decays exponentially fast as n tends to infinity. So this is for value p of the parameter strictly smaller than pc. And what's important here is that, So we'll come back to it later. This constant C2 depends on P. Okay, so this property means in particular that if you look at a big chunk of the lattice, say of size d by d, then the largest connected components that you will see are very tiny. They will be typically of size C times log d, so much smaller than d. So of course there will be also some connected components of size 1, 2, 3, and so on, but the largest ones will be typically of size C log d, so much smaller than d. And so if you look at this, so if you let d tend to infinity, so if you look at this picture from further and further away, then you will just, these finite connected components will just disappear. You won't see them anymore. And so this means that on large scale, the behavior of the process is trivial in the sense that if you look at it from very far away, then you only see something completely disconnected. You will see a sea with very tiny islands which disappear in the scaling limit. And well, the behavior for value p of the parameter strictly larger than pc is completely different. So in this case, one obtains the supercritical regime. In this case, it's known that almost surely there is an infinite cluster, which turns out to be unique. And again, we have an exponential decay property, but this time for finite cluster, in the sense that the probability for 0 to be connected to distance n, but that it doesn't lie in the infinite cluster. This probability also tends to 0 exponentially fast in n. Okay, so there is an infinite cluster, so there is a positive probability that 0 is connected to very far away, but the probability that it's connected to very far away without being in the infinite cluster, this probability also tends to 0 exponentially fast. So what you will see in this case is some very giant connected component that spans the lattice, and outside of this giant connected component, only very tiny islands of size, again, at most c times log d, if you consider a piece of the lattice of size of diameter d. So again, the large-scale behavior of the process is trivial in the sense that if you look at the picture from very far away, you will see something completely connected by the infinite cluster, but outside of it, just tiny islands which disappear in the limit. And between these two regimes, which are somewhat trivial on large scales, lies the critical regime. So when you fine-tune the parameter p to be exactly equal to pc, and this is the regime that displays the most interesting behavior. In particular, it displays a very strong conformal invariance property. So conformal invariance means the following. It's a commutation relation in the sense that if we consider two strict subdomains of the complex plane simply connected, we know from the Riemann mapping theorem that there is a three-parameter family of conformal maps from omega to omega prime. And conformal invariance is the commutation relation in the sense that we can consider so here I will consider side pair correlation on T, on a triangular lattice. So we can consider the side pair correlation model in the domain omega. So we can consider side pair correlation with a small mesh on the lattice with a small mesh delta. Then we would need also to consider some lattice approximation of the domain omega. So don't want to draw it, but let's call it omega delta. And well, there are ways to construct scaling limits of the pair correlation model as delta tends to 0. And conformal invariance means that we can. So it's a commutation relation between taking the scaling limit, taking the continuum limit, and mapping through the map phi. In the sense that we can first take the scaling limit here and map the distribution through a phi, or directly take the scaling limit here and you will get exactly the same distribution. So this is the conformal invariance property. So I just wanted to mention it quickly, but I'm not going to use it at all later. I'm going to use, in a crucial way, some consequences of it that I'm going to explain, but I think it's good to know this property. I'm sorry? P is, so it's at the critical time, so it's P equal to PC exactly. Yes, if P is, thanks for your question. If P is smaller than PC, as I've explained, the large-scale behavior is completely trivial. If P is larger than PC, it's also trivial. And it's only when you fine-tune exactly the parameter P to be equal to PC that you see the interesting behavior. And well, one goal of my talk is to explain you, convince you that somehow the critical regime does not seem so natural when you first look at it, because it's, I mean, you really have to fine-tune the parameter P to be exactly equal to PC to observe the critical regime. So it doesn't seem so natural in the sense that you, at first sight, you don't expect it to be to arise in nature, in the real world. But as I will explain in this talk, it's actually I will present mechanisms that show that this critical regime arises spontaneously without any fine-tuning of a parameter P. So in this sense, this is something that can be observed also in the real, between quotation marks, in the real world. And so the critical regime, in the critical regime, some highly non-trivial scaling limits arises, and in particular connected with the so-called Schramm-Loeffner evolution process, SLE, with parameter 6. Okay, so this is a picture of percolation at criticality. So when you fine-tune the parameter P to be exactly equal to PC. And if you look at this picture from closer, you can actually see that there will be, so let's say that the diameter here of this square is, the diameter of the side length is D. Then you will see one connected component of size comparable to D, but then also another connected component, smaller but still of size comparable to D, and so on. 2? Oh no, it's just the beamer that doesn't. It's just a bit blurred, but it's really black. Yeah. No, so there is only one color. It's there are black edges and just white edges which are not present. Okay, so here, well, if you call D this side length here, you will see connected components of size, several connected components of size comparable to D. So say D, 1/3 of D, 1/10 of D, and so on. So this is an indication that there are some non-trivial scaling limits. And if you look at the boundary of large connected components, so for example, well, there is one here, or you can follow it on the picture. Then the boundary of this large connected component is what is approximately described with the SLE process with parameter 6. So it's true in the scaling limit. So it's of course not true directly on this discrete picture, but it's approximately true, as I will explain in a minute. Okay, so if you look at the boundary of a large connected component on this picture, then it's approximately described an SLE process with parameter 6. And in particular, this boundary is highly non-trivial because it displays a fractal dimension 7/4, approximately 7/4, Hausdorff dimension approximately 7/4, which is the dimension of SLE with parameter 6. So we get in this way curves which in the limit have a dimension 7/4, which is strictly between 1 and 2, so rather rough objects. Okay, and well, I'm sorry, the title of the slide is not appearing properly, but here I meant near critical regime. It's up there. Okay, okay, then it's fine. Okay, so this slide is near critical regime. So I want to explain that using this connection with SLE with parameter 6, we can get a very good description of the critical regime. So when you take P to be exactly equal to PC, And from this description, you can also describe what happens near PC, what happens when the process crosses P equal PC, so when the percolation goes through what's called its phase transition. Okay, so it's it's a standard way of putting it in mathematics that you have your discrete process. So it's discrete, so it's complicated to work with. So what you do is you go to the continuum. You take the scaling limit, and in the scaling limit you have tools from analysis, and in particular this connection with SLE6 that I was mentioning earlier. And this collection allows you to use tools such as stochastic calculus to do explicit computations with SLE, with the continuum object. And then there is a way to then go back to the discrete models and to deduce properties such as the one I've written here. So if you're in critical regime, so we've seen that for P strictly smaller than PC, this probability decays, so tends to zero exponentially fast. For P larger than PC, this will converge to some positive constant, which is the probability that the origin is in the infinite cluster. And if you fine-tune P to be exactly equal to PC, so if you take P equal to PC, then this decays in also a non-trivial way. This decays like n to the minus 5 over 48 plus a small o of 1. So there is this non-trivial exponent 5 over 48 which shows up, and which comes from explicit computations with SLE6 using tools from stochastic calculus. And there is really no, as far as I know, there is really no intuitive explanation of where this 5 over 48 should come from. So there are some prediction in physics using non-rigorous method, but there is really no intuitive way of seeing why this should be 5 over 48, except going through the computations with SLE6. Okay, so this is another indication. So the fact that we have a power law decay and no longer an exponential decay is a further indication that the large-scale behavior of the process is highly non-trivial. And so this is as n tends to infinity. And this quantity is a quantity that I will denote by 1 of n in the following. So 1 here is to mean the fact that there is one black path going from 0 to distance n. And then once one has, so we can get in this way a really precise description of the critical regime. With this precise description at hand, then there is a set of tools, techniques, ideas due to Keston. So it's a very nice, wonderful paper from 1987 called Scaling Relations for Two-Dimensional Percolation. And these techniques allow you to describe the near critical regime, so for value P of the parameter close to PC, from the description you have for the critical regime. And we can deduce properties such as this one. So if we denote by theta of P the probability that 0 lies in an infinite cluster, so it's usually denoted by a 0 connected to infinity. So 0 belongs to an infinite cluster. If we denote by theta of P this quantity, then from what I've explained before, theta of P is just equal to 0 up to time PC. It's also known in 2 dimensions that it's equal to 0 at PC exactly. And then it's strictly positive for P larger than PC. It's equal to 1 for p equal to 1, of course, because then everything is open. And here one is able to derive the near critical behavior of this quantity theta, in the sense that we can show that theta of p decays like p minus pc to the 5 over 36 plus a small O of 1, so rather steep slope at pc, as p approaches pc from above. And it's, of course, equal to 0 for p smaller than pc. Okay, so using the description of the critical regime, one can get information about the near critical behavior, so the behavior of percolation, near criticality, so fluid phase transition. And this so this exponent 5 over 36 from theta of p comes directly from this exponent 5 over 48 for pi 1 of n, and another exponent which let me write it here, which describes the behavior of what's denoted as pi 4 of n. Pi 4 of n is the probability at pc to see 4 disjoint paths like here. So first, a black path starting from a neighbor of the origin, then a white path. So I will draw it with dotted lines. A white path starting from a neighbor of the origin going to distance n, then another black path, and then a white path. So 4 arms alternatingly black and white in a counterclockwise order. I hope this picture makes sense. So this quantity is usually denoted by pi 4 of n. So 4 because we are asking for 4 alternating arms with alternating paths with colors black and white. And this quantity decays. So there is another exponent showing up, which is known as the 4-arm, so polychromatic 4-arm exponent, which is 5 over 4, and then plus a small o of 1. Okay, and using these two exponents, then Skeleton scaling relation allow you to prove that theta of p itself decays like 5 over 36 plus a small o of 1. And the quantity which is important to describe the near critical regime is the so-called characteristic length. So far, I've stayed relatively vague about what I mean by near critical regime. So I've just said that for a value p of the parameter close to PC. But well, what does that mean exactly? So there is actually not a very precise definition of what that means. But I will try to give you at least an intuitive understanding of what I mean by near criticality. So first, it's possible to define what's called a characteristic length that we will denote by L of p. And intuitively, this characteristic length, so let's suppose for now, we have a value p which is strictly smaller than pc. So we are in the subcritical regime. So in this case, we know that all the connected components are finite. And L of p will roughly measure the size of the largest connected component in a finite box. Or another way of seeing it is that if you consider the probability that 0 is connected to distance n, then this probability decays roughly like e to the minus n over L of p. So I don't want to state too precise definition because, well, this will be one way to define the characteristic length by using supermultiplicativity. Turns out that it's not the most convenient way to define it, not the most convenient quantity to work with. And the most convenient quantity to work with would be in terms of the existence of paths crossing rectangles, which is a bit more complicated to define. It's a bit technical, so I don't want to give too much details in this talk, but let's just assume that we have such a quantity L of P that measures the typical size of large connected components for value P of the parameter smaller than PC. For value P of the parameter larger than PC, the situation is symmetric. L of P will measure the size of the largest finite connected components outside of the giant infinite connected component. Okay, and the fact that here there is this quantity 1 over L of P appearing, it's related to the fact I was mentioning earlier that the constant C2 in the exponential decay property depends on P. And in particular, what's important is that it will tend to 0 as P approaches PC, or in other words, L of P will tend to infinity as P approaches PC. And so this characteristic length L of P looks like that. So this is P, L of P. So for value P of the parameter outside of, so different from PC, then this is just a finite, some finite value because of the exponential decay property. So if you take P different from PC, you just get some finite value. So it corresponds to the fact that in the scaling limit, you get either something completely connected or something completely disconnected. But what's important is that as P approaches PC, this quantity blows up, and it blows up like, so it's symmetrical around PC, and it blows up like P minus PC to the minus 4/3 plus a small o of 1. So we get this exponent 4/3 showing up. And this 4/3 is coming so through a Keston scaling relation from this exponent 5/4. And then once we have this 4/3, then the 5/36 comes from a combination of this 5/48 and 4/3. 5/36 is just 4/3 times 5/48. So we really only need these two exponents, 5/4 and 5/48, to get all these critical exponents. And an intuitive way of seeing the characteristic length is also the following. Suppose we take now P strictly larger than PC. Then the probability that the origin is connected to distance L of P, this is of the same order of magnitude as theta of P. So this notation, I think you probably already know it, but it means that the ratio between the two sides is bounded away from 0 and infinity. And so it means that once you've reached distance L of P from the origin, then you're almost at infinity, in the sense that it will only cost you a positive probability to go from L of P to infinity. And on the other hand, this probability is also of the same order of magnitude. So this is one of the main results in Keston's paper, as the same probability at PC exactly. So this corresponds to the fact that below the characteristic scale L of P, you can approximate the percolation configuration by the percolation configuration at criticality exactly. And this is the quantity that I've denoted by pi1 of L of P. Okay, so this is why this exponent 5/36, this is how you get this exponent 5/36 by plugging in the exponent for pi1, which is 5/48, with the exponent for L, which is 4/3. Okay, so on this heuristic explanation, you see the two sides of the characteristic length. On the one hand, below the characteristic length L of P, what you see can be approximated by critical percolation. So it looks like, in a sense like critical percolation. So that's what we call the near critical regime. And on the other hand, it's already the scale at which you start to feel the supercritical behavior, in the sense that if you're able to reach distance L of P, then you're almost at infinity. It will only cost you some positive probability. And if here you replace L of P by, I don't know, 100 times L of P, then you will be very, very close to theta of P. Okay, so are there any questions so far? No? Okay, so so I hope it's what I've explained so far is clear. So here I should say that so I should have given more credits on this slide. So I should say that first the conformal invariance property was proved by Smirnov in 2001. It's only known in the particular case it's already very nice. It's only known in the case of side percolation on the triangular lattice. It was really a breakthrough. So in that case, PC is exactly equal to 1/2 because black and white sides play symmetric roles. And then the fact that from conformal invariance you can derive this exponent is by combining the conformal invariance property in the scaling limit with works by Lawler, Schramm, and Werner on Schramm-Loevner evolution processes. And then once you have this result for the critical regime, you can use Kelsten's scaling relations to describe the near-critical regime. Okay, so in short, the near-critical regime is defined by saying that if you have a system of size n, then you will consider the range of parameter p for which the characteristic length is larger than or equal to n. So this will be this interval around PC where the characteristic length is larger than or equal to n, so that what you see inside the system can be approximated by critical percolation. Okay, so now I'm going to explain how these ideas can be used to describe models for which the phase transition of percolation spontaneously arises. So this is the phenomenon of self-organized criticality. So the first model I was interested in is the following model of interfaces created by diffusing particles. So it was first studied by three physicists, Gouillet, Rousseau, and Sapoval. And they observed both experimentally and numerically that if you consider a system where, well, I don't want to enter too much into detail, but we have some large piece of the lattice, and we have some source of particle on the top side. And once the particles are inside the system, you just let them evolve in some, according to some stochastic rules. But what's important in this system is that if you wait for long enough time, then you will see a gradient in the concentration of particles, in the sense that there is a very high density of particles close to 1 around the source, which is on the top side, and a density which is very small, far away from the source. And if you consider such a system, they observe that you will observe some fractal interfaces. If you look at the giant connected component of particles connected to the source, its boundary will be a fractal interface with dimension very close to 7/4. And well, it shouldn't be a coincidence that this 7/4 is also the dimension of SLE with parameter 6, or as I explained earlier, the dimension of the boundaries of large connected components for critical percolation. And it's possible to give a rigorous mathematical model for which we can prove this such a result. So the model is the following. So we start with a very large number n of particles, all starting from a given size, so say the origin on the triangular lattice. And then you let them perform independent random walks. So they're just independent of each other. And if you wait for a time long enough, so here the right scaling would be t proportional to n, so t equal to lambda n, with lambda strictly smaller than some constant lambda c. And here the constant lambda c is not so relevant, so it's actually lattice dependent, but you can compute it completely explicitly. So it's just a small random walk computation. So if you wait for a time lambda n for lambda small enough, then the boundary will look like SLE with parameter 6. Okay, so the time that we can prove is the following. So if you consider Tn equal to lambda n for lambda strictly smaller than lambda c, then with high probability as n tends to infinity, there will exist a unique macroscopic interface surrounding the origin, in the sense that on this picture you can look. So since the particles perform independent random walks, there are some sites which contain strictly more than one particle. So really the sites close to the origin may contain many particles. You can look at all the sites that contain at least one particle, and then look at the connected components of these sites. So what you will observe is a large connected component centered on the origin. And the boundary of this large connected component is a macroscopic interface surrounding the origin. This macroscopic interface remains localized in an annulus of width T⁻⁷ over around a circle with radius proportional to square root of T. So what's important here is that you can predict where the interface should be approximately. So we get some constant depending on lambda times square root of T. And then you will get fluctuations of size T⁻⁷, so much smaller than square root of T. And so if you look at the percolation configuration in this annulus, then this can be approximated by critical percolation. And so it shares many local similarities with SLE with parameter 6, so in particular the same Hausdorff dimension 7/4. Okay, and a key observation in this is that in order to describe the macroscopic interface, you only need to look at this annulus of width T⁻⁷, and so you only need to look at a negligible fraction of the particles. And let me just mention that well, the interfaces that we get in this way are really near critical interfaces and not critical interfaces exactly, in the sense that they are very different from SLE with parameter 6. So this is a joint work with Wendelin Werner, and in this work we show that there is some really strong local asymmetry that persists in the scaling limit, which makes these interfaces singular with respect to SLE6. Okay, well, these are some older results that I wanted to mention, but now let me turn to frozen percolation, and also another model which is intimately related to frozen percolation that I want to discuss is the model of forest fire processes on a lattice. So here I will explain I will consider the particular case of the square lattice. So so we are considering the square lattice Z2. We are playing with the vertices, so it's related to side percolation on Z2. And on this lattice, so we start with a completely empty lattice in the beginning. On this lattice, some trees start to appear independently at some rate 1. Okay, so trees appear. And well, if you just consider this rule, then what you will get is just independent side percolation up to some time change. But we add this extra rules that the lattice is hit by lightning at a very small rate. And we'll consider a rate that tends to 0 as so we'll take the rate tend to 0. So to fix ideas, we can simply take the rate to be lambda n equal 1 over n, and then take n tend to infinity. And when the lightning hits the lattice, then so here this site is hit by lightning. Then this site is so the tree on the side burns. It's destroyed, and then it becomes empty. And then when the site is empty, new trees can appear later at again a rate 1. And when a tree is hit by lightning, then it's destroyed, it burns. But what's important is that not only this tree burns, the site becomes empty, but its whole connected components burns. So here, for example, not only this site burns, but the whole connected component burns, and all these sites become empty. So if you just burn the site, you will just get again independent percolation. But here we have this extra constraint that not only the site, but its whole connected component burns. And for very small times, as I've explained earlier, the connected components are very tiny, so the fire won't be able to spread very far. We'll only see connected components of size 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So the fire won't be able to spread very far. In particular, as the rate tends to 0, then what you will see in the limit is just like independent percolation. You won't see the effect of fires. But what's important is that as the connectivity of the forest increases, so as the density of trees increases, then you will see larger and larger connected components, which will help the fires to spread. And so you have really a competition between these two effects, that the more trees there are, the more connected the forest is, but also the easier it will be for the fires to spread. And here you'll see that when the density of the fire gets large, some large connected components will burn, and they will create lasting scars on the configuration of trees. So you will get this big hole that, well, it will take you some time to recreate connection in this region. Okay, so we can introduce the time Tc such that the density of tree becomes equal to Pc. So this is Pc for side percolation on the square lattice Z2. And it's not very difficult to prove that if you consider the process in the time interval 0 Tc, then the probability that you see something tends to 0 as n tends to infinity, as the right tends to 0. So this is from what I've explained earlier, that the fires won't be able to spread very far. So in particular, if you look at a given vertex, the origin, the probability that it burns, that it's hit by lightning, or it's a connected component which burns before time Tc, this probability tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. And here you can even replace the 0 by some fixed neighborhood of it. But then the main question is what happens after the critical time Tc. And this is a typical example of a non-monotone process because of the existence of these two competing effects that, as I explained earlier, the more connected the forest is, the easier it will be for fires to spread. And so this is a process for which all the classical tools from statistical mechanics cannot be used, so you have no FKG inequality, for example. And actually very little is known, so you really have to develop ad hoc method to study it. So question you may ask are like this. So can you get a qualitative description around this critical time Tc? For a fixed T, is it true that the probability that 0 burns in the time interval 0 T tends to 0 as n tends to infinity, or do you see a sequence of fires? And related question, can you describe the stationary measure? So you fix some n and you wait for a very, very long time. So can you describe the equilibrium measure? So it's just a Markov chain. So you may want to study the stationary measure. And can you say anything about how fast it converges to equilibrium? Meaning, can you get some estimate on the mixing times? So, well, at the moment, our understanding is quite limited, so we are very far from being able to answer to question 3 and 4, but still, we have some rather satisfying description of what happens around the critical time Tc, and also some partial answer to question 2. So it's actually a work in progress with Rob Vandenberg and Demeter Kiss. We are able to prove that there exists some delta positive independent of n, such that nothing happens before time Tc plus delta. So the probability that 0 burns before time Tc plus delta tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. And what's important here is that delta is really independent of n. You really have to wait for some positive time after Tc to see something. And well, this is one result, but more important probably is we really have a very rather good qualitative description of what happens in this time interval Tc plus delta. So what you will observe is many fires surrounding the origin. So intuitively, you would expect log n of them. This fire will be more and more localized, and then there will be a last fire which happens at some given distance from the origin, but this distance is will never hit the origin exactly. Okay, and these results are obtained by comparison with what we call the volume frozen percolation model. So it's a model which is it's a percolation type model. So here I represented it on the triangular lattice T. And it's a model where you let site become occupied at say rate 1. So they form connected components, but you stop the growth of a connected component as soon as it contains at least n vertices for some fixed parameter n. So you fix some parameter n, you let the connected components grow, and as soon as the connected component has at least n vertices, then you stop its growth, which means that all the, so it's not very clear on the picture here, but all the vertices along its boundary, so all the vacant vertices along its boundary will stay vacant forever. So here on this picture, you can see three types of vertices. So this is here represented. So this picture is actually due to Demeter Kiss. So on this picture, you can see two different types of vertices. So the blue vertices are frozen vertices. So these are vertices which are in connected components that reached volume n. So their growth was stopped. So this is what we call frozen clusters or frozen vertices inside these clusters. Then there are white vertices, which are the vertices which are along the boundary of frozen cluster and stay vacant forever. And then when this cluster freeze, they will also create some holes inside the lattice. And it's possible that these holes have a volume strictly smaller than n, and in this case, nothing can freeze inside them. And these are the vertices in red. So if by any chance you create a hole with strictly less than n vertices, then what will happen is that all the vertices inside the hole will become open ultimately, but they will never be able to freeze. And these are the vertices which are in red in these pictures. So the red vertices are vertices which are occupied in the final configuration, but were not able to form a frozen cluster. And here, well, you see various shades of blue. So this is not white, this is really blue, but very light. And the various shades of blue correspond to the time at which the cluster froze. So dark blue means that it froze close to time t, close to when the density of trees is critical, and light blue means that it froze very late. Okay, and well, the first result that we obtained with Rob is the following. So I think I need to keep that one. Let me. The first result that we obtained with Rob is the following. So, well, first you can run the process in a box with side length c times square root of n. So this is the side length you should take so that the number of vertices in the box is of order n. So first of all, you need to take c larger than 1 because otherwise there are not enough vertices in the box. So let me assume that c is larger than 1. And what will happen is that as the parameter p is slightly above pc, you will start to see the supercritical cluster inside this box. So we will see a giant connected component inside the box, so which really looks like I've drawn. This giant connected component is more or less the intersection of the infinite connected component with the box. And this giant connected component has a volume, as a number of sites, which is of order theta of p. So theta of p can be seen as the density of the infinite cluster times the volume of the box, so times c squared times n. Okay, and since theta of p tends to 0 as p approaches pc from above, this is strictly smaller than n for p slightly above pc. And then what will happen is that this giant connected component will freeze close to some time p bar, such that this, so theta of p bar times c squared times n is equal to n, the parameter of the process. And so you get that theta of p bar is equal to 1 over c squared. And since theta is strictly increasing on the time interval PCP, there exists a unique value p bar for which this is satisfied. And moreover, we have a very good control on the volume. So I say it's approximately this quantity, but the fluctuation, because of the exponential decay property, the fluctuations are very tiny, so it's very concentrated around the expected value. And so the random time at which this giant connected component will freeze is very close to the p-bar satisfying this equation. And so this connected component will then freeze. It has a density 1 over c squared because of this equation, and then it leaves holes which have size, which have diameter of order L of p bar. And here p bar is just fixed, so L of p bar is just some fixed number. And so as n tends to infinity, the hole will be too small for a Frozen cluster to appear inside them. Okay, so in this case, there will only be one giant connected component that freezes, and then it leaves holes which are too small for anything meaningful to happen. So in these holes, you will just get red vertices, as in the previous picture. Okay, so in this way, we get that the probability that the origin freezes tends, as n tends to infinity, to 1 over c squared for c strictly larger than 1. And so then when you see such a result, you want to say 1 over c squared tends to 0 as c tends to infinity. So can you simply let c tend to infinity and then exchange a limit and say that this probability tends to 0 for the full plane process? And the answer is a definite no. So this square root of n turns out to be the first scale that we denote by m1 of n in a sequence of exceptional scales, mk of n. And each of these exceptional scales, mk of n, behaves like a power law in n, so it behaves like n to the delta k plus a small o of 1. And you can write an explicit recursion relation for the sequence delta k. So delta 1 is equal to 1/2, which corresponds to square root of n. And then delta k plus 1 is 1/2 plus 5 over 96 times delta k. And this 5 over 96 is coming directly from this 5 over 48 here. So I don't have time to explain why, but it's just a short heuristic argument. And in particular, what's important is that this sequence delta k is strictly increasing, and it tends to this value delta infinity, which is 48 over 91, as k tends to infinity. And these cases are exceptional in the following sense. So if you run the process in a box with side length m of n, then you see two completely different behavior according to whether m of n is of the same order of magnitude as some mk of n for some given k, or if you start in between two exceptional scales, mk of n and mk plus 1 of n, but very far from both of them. So if you start with a box of size comparable to mk of n, then the limit as n tends to infinity of the probability that 0 freezes is strictly positive. On the other hand, if you start in between two exceptional scales but very far away from both, then this probability tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. And also the final configuration is very different in the two cases. In the first case, the clusters freeze on the whole time interval PC1. In the second case, they only freeze in a near critical window around the PC. In the first case, you will see both macroscopic cluster, which can be either frozen or non-frozen, and also microscopic cluster with size of order 1, 2, 3, and so on. On the other hand, in the second case, you will observe mesoscopic cluster in the sense that you observe cluster with volume of order n to the delta for some exponent delta between 0 and 1. And then when you see this picture, well, you want to say that if you now run the process in the full plane, it would be very unlucky to fall exactly on one of these exceptional scales. So the typical configuration should be the configuration that you obtain when you fall in between two exceptional scales but far away from them. And well, this turns out to be the case, but it turned out to be much more complicated to prove than this result. So it's a long paper with Rob and Demeter. We were indeed able to prove that the probability that the origin freezes tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. And we get qualitative behavior of what happens for the final configuration. So what you will see that if you look at the cluster of the origin in the final configuration, then this so this cluster of the origin will have a size which is so it will have a volume which is between 1 and n, and it will be deconcentrated in the sense that you will get something of order n to the delta for some exponent delta which is random between 0 and 1 in some sense, as n tends to infinity. So you will only see mesoscopic cluster. You will see cluster of size, I don't know, n to the 1/3, n to the 2/5, and so on. But you will never see clusters of size comparable to 1 or size comparable to n. There is some sort of a density in the volume of the connected components. And you also see more Foson clusters surrounding the origin. So typically we expect of order log n of them. And but well, this turned out to be quite a long road. It's actually a 90 pages paper, and there are several very important difficulties that we had to tackle, and that got us stuck for. Well, in the end, it took us several years to write out everything. The first difficulty is that you have to rule out the existence of bottlenecks in the successive holes, in the sense that when a cluster freezes, it will leave holes which look like holes in the supercritical cluster, and you need to really understand the geometry of these percolation holes. And you have to rule out the possibility that when your cluster freezes, it creates a bottleneck of this form, which would perturb the future evolution of the process. If you have, for instance, here a hole with volume, so it's very simplified, but say n, 2/3 of n, and here a hole of volume 2/3 of n, then in order for something to freeze inside this hole, you would have to wait for this vertex here to become open, and so you might have to wait much longer than you would hope, and so this would completely perturb the dynamics of the process. So you have to rule out this possibility. And what we established is a property which is interesting by itself for near critical percolation, is the fact that you can approximate percolation holes in the Minkowski sense, in the sense that if you consider a grid with mesh alpha times the characteristic length L of P, then by taking alpha small enough, you get a good enough, you can get as precise an approximation as you want of the percolation hole on the grid. And what's important here is that the alpha does not depend on P, so you can make it uniformly for all P larger than PC. Another bottleneck in our proof was that. So I've explained earlier that theta of P is of the same order of magnitude as pi 1 of L of P, so it's one of the main results in Keston's scaling relations paper. But this is not good enough for our purpose. What we really need is that the ratio between the two converges to a constant as P approaches PC. And for that, the whole scaling limit of near critical percolation is required as constructed by Garban, Peter, and Schramm. And this is an important input in our paper, and so we are able to prove that theta of P actually is equivalent to some constant times pi 1 of L of P, and this property allows us to say precisely where the successive freezing times will occur when you look at the successive Foson clusters surrounding the origin. And then another difficulty also is to compare the full plane process with the process in finite boxes. And there are really also some tricky measurability issues. So we use a sort of Markov property, but for two-dimensional subsets of the lattice. But when you use this Markov property, you really have to make sure that you're not using, when you condition, for instance, of something being a hole, you have to make sure that you're not using any information from inside the hole. So it gave us also some headache about how to write it exactly. So we're really using some two-dimensional Markov property in the proof. But then what's nice with this result is that the behavior that we establish is relatively robust, in the sense that a similar behavior occurs in other models, such that the forest fire process I've discussed earlier. There is a separation of scales that we expect to see in different models. So in particular, so here in volume frozen percolation, but also for the forest fire processes. Okay, so I think I should stop here. I'm already way over time, but thank you for your attention.